Hi guys, welcome back to our part B of our Asus GTX 780ti DCU OC video review. Before we jump into the benchmark results on the screen behind me, we'll have a quick look at the card that's in the system. Now that it's been opened up and properly installed, we'll see how it looks. And there's also a feature I need to mention with the SLI connectors on it. They've actually extended them out a bit so you can use a hard style connector, whereas on the previous model, the non-TIs, the SLI connectors were in a bit more on the card, so it stopped you from using a hard bridge because it was hitting the cooler. So we'll have a quick look at that as well. Alright, so moving on to the card that's installed. You can see it installed there. So, so in the previous unboxing in part A, where I mentioned they come with the aluminium stickers that you can stick on the card, so you can see that this board is the X79 Deluxe, so it uses a gold theme with the heat sinks. So if you were installing this card, you would use the gold stickers that came with it, and then if you're using it in a typical red ROG system, you would use the red ones that come in it. Another mention on the SLI connectors, which I just mentioned before, you can actually see how they're kind of protruding out. They're extended, so that just allows you to use a hard bridge and it'll just run down past the cooler here, whereas last time they were way back here and you had to use a flexi bridge and bend it out and around. So it's pretty good that they've thought of that with this new model. So that's pretty much it for just going inside. We'll just jump in and have a look at the results. The three games we went through were Battlefield 4, Metro Last Light and Batman Origins. So first of all, we'll just go over the specs of the system and then check out the results. Alright, we'll just have a quick look at the system specs before we go into the benchmark results. Alright, so the system we used has a CPU of an Intel 3960X at 4.3 gig. We overclocked it a bit just because the CPU is getting a bit old. It still is really powerful. It's just getting a little bit old. The architecture is a bit older, so we overclocked out to 4.3, which is a pretty standard overclock, which is quite achievable. We also use the Asus GTX 780 Ti, which is in the review, or which is the card we are reviewing. It's got 8 gigs of quad channel HyperX 2100 megahertz memory. The motherboard is an Asus X79 Deluxe board, which I mentioned before. Power supply is a Tough Power DPS 850, and we use two Kingston SSDs in RAID 0, and they're the two HyperX 120 gig edition SSDs. Alright, now moving on to the first benchmark was Metro Last Light. We did play around with physics with this a bit, but then we decided not to include the physics. We kind of realized that the CPU was powerful enough to run the physics off the CPU. We did add a 760 Ti, but the difference just was not enough gain, so we just left the physics out of it for now and didn't worry about messing around with a secondary video card. I'll cover the temps first. So max temps was 81 degrees on max and 43 degrees on minimum. And for the benchmark results, we just ran the built-in benchmark program you get with Metro Last Light. We ran everything on maximum, full res, which was at 1080p, and everything was at the complete max. So we had a minimum of 9, an average of 52, and a max of 94. So this was completely playable, and it actually looked really well. Alright, so moving on to the OC settings. So we did a slight overclock on this card. We had the boost clock at 1134 and the memory at 7400. So that's a slight overclock, nothing crazy. We didn't have to up any voltages or anything. Temperatures for that only increased it just a few degrees, so it wasn't really anything here or there. For the benchmark results, so we had 10 on the minimum frames, the average was 53, and the maximum was 109. So main increase there on the maximum frames for that one. Alright, moving on to Battlefield 4. Unfortunately, Battlefield 4 doesn't have a built-in benchmark program, so I had to record the fraps, the frames per second manually with the program and just convert them over into minimum, average and maximum. We'll just have a look at the temperatures first. The temperatures were a little bit less than Metro Last Light. This isn't as intense, so we had 71 for maximum and 40 minimum. and for our frames per second on stock we had 38 on minimum, average was 102 and 156 on maximum. And this ran really smooth. This was on complete maximum settings on 1080p as well. And as you can see on the OC settings, we had the same for the overclocked as Metro Last Light. So we kept the overclock settings the same throughout all the games we tested. The temps was pretty much exactly the same again, as this overclock isn't too much of an increase. For minimum frames we had 45, average was 110 and the maximum was 158, so a slight increase there. Nothing too major, but you can definitely tell that overclocking does give you a bit of a benefit with the frames per second. And moving on to the last benchmark was Batman Origins. This game is getting a little bit old, but the textures are still pretty crazy in this game. So temperatures were a little bit hotter. We have had the system up for a little while. This was our last benchmark. So we're at 72 degrees for the maximum and 46 for the minimum. We did have everything maxed out, complete settings, 1080p once again. Minimum frames was 99, average was 140, and the maximum was 181. So some pretty high frames there. And for our OC settings, same speeds again. For minimum was 111, 153 for average, and 226 for the maximum. So quite a bit of an increase there. So it seems like Batman does sort of cater well for overclocking the video card, whereas the other two benchmarks maybe sort of rely on CPU just a little bit more. That's why they weren't too much of an increase, and the temperatures were pretty much the same, just a slight increase there. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this review. Just wanted to go over some of the popular games out there and just to show you how well this video card can actually perform in these games. As you can clearly see, it was well over 100 on most of these tests, and these were at the complete maximum that these games can run at. So it was great to see that it handled those fine. Also, the cooler on the card ran relatively quiet for such a high-end card, and it also ran really cool as well compared to other 780 Ti's on the market. So yeah, just want to say thanks for watching. Once again, if you haven't seen the unboxing, click on the link below and you'll be able to check that out. And I want to thank Asus for sending out this card, and stay tuned for more videos in the future.